All right, welcome back to the show. Total Financial Solutions Safer Money Hour. And for those of you joining us on Facebook Live on Total Financial Solutions or TFS Wealth and hometownstation.com, welcome to the show. I'm with Ara Norwood, basically a time management expert and a man of 3 to 4 different lives, if you will. Give us a little bit of a background of who you are, because we want to get into some of the questions on goal management, goal and time management. But tell me about you.
Sure. I live a varied life, very dynamic life. I not only teach college at the adjunct professor level at College of the Canes here in Santa Clarita. I'm a management consultant full-time. I speak and write. I put out a newsletter twice a month called Uncommon Sense. I'm in a band called Dawn of Ascension, a duo that we perform in different parts of the state.
What kind of music?
Mostly pop and ballads. And we do corporate events, women's conferences, that sort of thing. And I'm also somewhat of an expert in the Founding Fathers. I spent a lot of time looking at 6 of our founders, and I'm working on a book on their lives.
Fantastic. One of them that fascinates you the most?
Oh, I would say Thomas Jefferson is very fascinating. I wouldn't say he's my favorite, but I would say that his erudition, his brilliance, was uncanny. I would say that if I had to have a choice, though, of having dinner with one of them, I would say it would have to be George Washington.
Yes.
The admiration and awe and respect I have for the man is pretty unparalleled.
I think when you take a look at somebody like those gentlemen, they have an uncanny ability to actually look back in history and then look forward and see some of the pitfalls that a country would receive or at least go through 200, 300, 400 years maybe into the future. And it was an amazing opportunity, if you will, to research and read through those as I went to school as well.
There's no question that all of them were prescient and could see around corners. I mean, Alexander Hamilton alone was quite forward-thinking, and I'm just delighted there's been a resurgence of interest in Alexander Hamilton. Not only the Broadway play, but a number of new biographies have come out recently that are pretty well done.
Well, we're excited about having you here for goal setting and time management. This is just a corner of your life. And tell us a little bit about the advice you might give to college students. A lot of young students today have now taken off to at least look at their school already. They've been there. They've done that. They know where they're going to go. Some 11th graders, juniors in high school, are doing that touring, the final touring this summer. They're going to go into a world where when I went into it, high school was fairly simple for me. College was like getting an eye-opening kick in the fanny where I had to go, oh my gosh, you're telling me I had to actually study? You know, it was a hard transition, especially when the expectations in college are so much different than the expectations in high school. Maybe not all of them. I went to LA Unified, so maybe my bar was set a little differently than others.
Well, there was a piece in The Economist, a British publication some years ago, that talked about how to avoid poverty. And I think they were aiming it at high school students because they said the 3 things you've got to do to avoid poverty are, number 1, finish high school, number 2, get married and stay married, and number 3, get a job, any job. And I actually just mentioned that to my students last night in a management class I was teaching. So what I recommend to my students is not only finish high school, since most of them already have, they're in college now, and I tell them also finish college, and it doesn't really matter what your major is unless you're going into the professions. Major in whatever you want to major in, but learn all that you can, but it's a lot more important that they figure out how to learn whatever the subject matter is.
Right.
Yeah. How to learn, how to be effective, how to produce, how not to be, a laggard or be lazy, but how to get out there and volunteer for things and do more than is required of them. If they do that, they'll stand out in the job market and they will get promotions, they'll get opportunities. And so there's a little doubt in my mind that it doesn't take a lot of luck to succeed in a career.
We had John Scully on the show, who's an author, former CEO of Apple Computer and a president of Pepsi before that. Very important conversation that he had with us, which will sit with me forever. And this man was 70 years old. We had him about a year ago. And he said this fascinating thing to me, and maybe you would concur. And he had just written a book, and he said, Jeff, if you remember, one of the things that's key to understanding the next generation, the next wave of growth in the economy, etc., was very simple. He said, all questions that can be asked and answered have been done. There is no more question that is left to be answered. We have Google, we have Yahoo, we have Bing, we have search engines, we have He said the next thing is to figure out the new questions to ask.
I completely concur with that. Questions are, without a doubt, our most powerful intellectual tool. And if you really think deeply about it, you realize that all of the great inventions of the past, from the microprocessor to the stirrup to the stethoscope to radar, all of those things were the result of somebody asking a question and acting on that question. So I agree with him. Drucker used to, I studied with Peter Drucker in graduate school, and he used to point out to me that it really matters not only what questions you ask, but it matters more that you're asking the right question, more so even than getting the answers. Because if you're asking the wrong questions, you end up climbing the proverbial ladder to success only upon reaching the top rung to find out that your ladder was against the wrong wall all along.
Right.
So it's really important that I think that Scully has it right. Coming up with the proper questions, the right questions, the more relevant questions are really what matters.
You know, there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there who have taken a step, who've gone forward and looked at ways of being successful and wealthy. And there isn't a better time ever that I can remember. I'm basically a serial entrepreneur. I've owned businesses, consulted on maybe 80 plus businesses over the years, owned dozens. My direction has always been about the best opportunity for success. You know, so many times people try to go to the library and study and research back in the day, and I would have books laid out over this entire table. Today, that information is found in seconds, if not maybe a minute, and it's found on a computer. Information is no longer reserved for the rich, wealthy, those that can access higher education, who have transportation to get to college. It's none of that anymore. Information is everywhere now. It's the proper use of the proper information. It's not knowledge is power. That's a baloney. That's gone. It's over. Everybody has, quote, knowledge. It's wisdom, or maybe if you want to be right, wisdom is power.
You're taking the words right out of my mouth, honestly. I was going to just say that wisdom is not the same as knowledge or information. And yes, you can grab information off the internet in a matter of seconds.
That's right.
That does not mean you have a deeper understanding.
That's right.
And there is one thing to be able to find a quote-unquote answer quickly. It's another thing to have a depth of knowledge which comes with experience.
Yes. You know, when we teach a school, we have a class called Total Money School, and we have a basic class, and the class is very exciting and interesting, and here's one of the things that we talk about. You want to be super wealthy and successful, you have to learn a couple of things. Number one, there's different rungs of the ladder. You know, how many times have people gone along and they said things like, oh, you know, I teach my boss what to do. I can't believe it. I've taught the boss 4 times and he doesn't even know my job. Because what to do is different. So let's talk about that. How do you do something? How do I put this together? That's the lowest rung. That's a $20, $25 an hour job, right? You can find out how. Everybody, just pick up your phone. How do you do things? How do I YouTube? It's done. What to do? That's the boss. The boss knows what to do next. First you do this, then you do that. Boss, you don't even know how to do it. No, I don't, but you do. So the boss is the $40 an hour job. The why things are done, that's the entrepreneur. That's the millionaire. I don't know your thoughts.
No, I completely concur with that. And that's why you see executives coming up with the reasons for why we do things. That's why they set direction. That's why they're paid the dollars they're paid, to see ahead, to see around corners, and to understand what we have to do to make adjustments to be relevant in the marketplace. Anybody can learn the what to do. At the very lowest level. And that is why people are paid different amounts of money, because of the value that they bring. But when you understand the larger context of why you do something and why it's relevant to the world and why there's a market for that, that is where you command larger financial resources for yourself and for others.
And it's very important, guys. We're here, by the way, we'll check in with you here. Ara Norwood, College of the Canyons adjunct professor, nice, but that is a very minor part of his pedigree. Time management, goal setting expert. Ara, give us a question on goal setting. I know, Jeff, you have a question on some of the goal setting, and how do we start this process of kind of building our own financial success?
Well, I hear something that is, the undertone here is very important, in my opinion, when you're talking about people of success, large-scale success, the CEOs of large companies, people that have made an impact on the world. I think it goes back to what you said earlier, Ara, which is, finding your deepest values, and they go out, and I think their goal is to answer why. the why within them. So I think with that, those folks have a tremendous ability to set goals. And then I'm sure they have a way of staying on track to meet those goals. And I think it stems back to what you had said earlier, where you spend some time prioritizing your goals and the actions to get to those goals. Can you elaborate on that for us?
Certainly. I read a report some time ago. I can't recall where I read it from, but it was very, very profound. It mentioned that one of the reasons why people are impoverished is because they don't spend a lot of time thinking about the future. Now, that struck me. I didn't quite get it at first. What's the relevance between thinking about the future? The point of the article, though, the point of the report was that those who think only in the present, their time horizon for thinking is in the next 5 minutes. What am I going to eat? What am I going to watch on TV? What soap opera is on right now? Is it time to go to the restroom? You know, that sort of thing. And that's about the extent of their thinking. But people who actually succeed in profound ways think very deeply about the future. They think about the future quite often. So goal setting is all about thinking of the future. A goal means you do not have that currently. You have a vision of what's possible. A vision is basically a desired future state, something that you wish to acquire, attain. It could be a tangible item. It could be some kind of status. I've got a master's degree, let's say, or I've traveled around the world or what have you. But there's something future-centric about that. And so as you think about those things and you set goals that make you salivate, goals that really make you want to get up in the morning and go after them, having a goal that is that powerful and personal to you, that actually negates what Arif said earlier about, what if things distract you? When is it time to give up? That sort of thing. And when you have a goal that is deeply burning inside of you, chances are very high you're not going to give up until you attain that goal. And once you attain it, you've seen, hey, I just went through a process that was successful. I just acquired something as a result of this process. Let's try that again, shall we? And they set more goals, bigger goals. And sometimes they fail, but oftentimes they succeed. And it becomes a very powerful process.
Well, I have kind of a two-part question for you with that, because forward-thinking people, those are the folks that kind of move the world forward, if you will. Part of the challenge, I think, would be the ability to stay present, because you're so forward-thinking in some cases that you might be neglecting what's right in front of you. Not necessarily have I eaten today or have I gone to the restroom, but shy of that, I mean, there are other things that are probably right in front of you that people don't want to address.
Absolutely correct. And that's why there's successful goal setters actually live in two worlds, both the future as well as the present.
Okay.
The future is what governs the creation of the goal. That's their desired future state. And that's really a leadership phenomenon. But then they realize, look, I've got to manage my resources and manage my time right now in the here and now to do the next task to move that much closer to the goal. Mm-hmm. Every football team wants to win the game, but they recognize in this huddle right now, we're going to call the very next play, and that's our present moment. Then another huddle and another play, etc. Same with goal setting.
Sure. You hit on something, Ara, that just blew me away. I always talk about rich and poor people. Maybe you don't know some of the history, but 10 years ago or so, I read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, changed my life. In 9 months, my income tripled. Within a couple of years, we retired, pulled Logan, who's my oldest boy, who took your class and who referred us to you and said, Dad, this guy is you, but looking a little bit different, but he's you. And I said, oh my gosh. And part of that is, look, poor people and rich people, they think I didn't say wealthy and broke, right? That's money in your pocket. Poor and rich is a mindset. Poor people think such short term. What are you doing this weekend? Let's party tonight. What are you doing this Friday? Rich people think project-based, longer term, goal setting. And it sounds the same thing that Robert Kiyosaki has said all of these years and that we follow and what really assisted us with some of our success. And that is that ability to walk down the road of saying, how do I change what I think? Listen, poor people, rich people, they have the same amount of time, 24 hours in a day. Wealthy people, broke people, the same. So why is it that some people seem to... Look, I said this, I don't know if I said it on the radio, I said it speaking in front of a group I know recently. Look, there are people that come to this country, barely speak the language, sleep on the floor in the back of a donut shop or a liquor store or nail salon, right? They do this 2 or 3, 4 years, 5 years, and they're the manager, and then they end up, and in 10 years they own the business, and in 15 years they're millionaires. So why is it that there are 2, 3, 4 generations over decades that can't even get out of their own way?
Well, my take on that is I was tutored long ago by one of my first mentors, a fellow named Don Atkinson, who was very, very wealthy and very, very successful. And he gave a kind of a cliche in a speech that I sat in on. He said that there's really 3 kinds of people in the world. You've probably heard this. Those who make things happen, those who watch things happen. He said there's a third kind, and those are the people that don't even know anything ever happened.
Yeah, like, hey, right. Wondering what just happened.
But to your point, it boils down to the decision. Making a decision. Most people don't take responsibility for their future. They allow life to happen to them.
Yes.
I've found that people who were successful simply made a firm and undying commitment, a decision that this is what I'm going to do, this is how I'm going to govern my life, this is what I wish to accomplish, and I'm going to pay the price to accomplish it. And chances are very high, there's exceptions, but chances are very high that they will ultimately accomplish far more than they would have. They usually don't accomplish everything they set out to accomplish. Life is a little too dynamic with a lot of twists and turns, a lot of bumps in the road. But let's face it, those who don't overtly set goals that they wish to have govern their lives and decide to achieve them, that lack of decision means they are defaulting to mediocrity.
Yeah, it seems that, look, everybody has a plan for their life. I don't care who you are. There's a plan for your life. It's either a plan that somebody else has for you or you have for yourself. And if you don't step up and take charge, listen, you can be part of a system. You can have a job with the county, state, federal government and be wealthy and successful, or you can be broke. There isn't a formula that says you have to have an IT tech job, a computer programming, and this. No. There are plenty of ways to do it. And I think part of that when we talk about leadership and taking leadership for yourself and for your own actions, one of the things you mentioned earlier that I wanted to kind of circle back on was, some ways to avoid poverty. And you went through a few things. Let me tell you a third. If you have a child out of wedlock and you're the woman, most of the time it's the woman, the lady, because you end up keeping the kids and the guys sometimes go away. But if you're stuck and you do not marry that person, if that's not part of your future plans, and you're a single mom, chances of you ever getting out of poverty are like 70, 80% not going to happen. I've seen studies, and Star Jones is now a commentator and a welfare recipient, a lady for so many years, who've really spoken on this and said, I got tired of being part of the system and just a taking. And she went through and became a successful person. And when the studies were done and it said, part of this is to be responsible for your own actions, making sure that you never stop learning, making sure you always decide who you're going to hang around with, as those people's future are tied to yours. If you call them friend, you are tied to them.
Couldn't agree more. And in fact, I'll use my own example. I'm having my high school's 40-year reunion this coming July, a little over 2 months from now. I happen to be the chairman of that reunion. As a result of that work, I have recently gotten back into the lives of the majority, over 70% of the 427 students that graduated with me. We have 3 individuals I've discovered that I'm aware of that are still living in a state of poverty. All 3 of them fit the description you mentioned. All of them had children out of wedlock. All of them had an extremely long road to hoe. They went more than 20 years in a state of poverty. Even when the child was old enough to be on his or her own, they had been so accustomed to the world of poverty, they haven't yet had the vision to pull themselves out of that. So you're absolutely correct. When I mentioned the article from The Economist about one of the 3 things to avoid poverty is getting married and staying married,
yes,
I point out to my students that when you divorce, and sometimes divorce is inevitable, sometimes you just can't help it. If there's, let's say, physical abuse on the part of the husband towards the wife, I understand that has to probably be the outcome. However, in many instances, there probably were other ways to deal with the marital challenges that are going on that circumvented divorce. And when you avoid divorce, when you go into divorce, both parties, the husband and the wife, usually end up much, much worse off financially than they would have been otherwise. The finances get decimated. I know story after story of an individual who I know a guy who had 3 homes, wonderful wife, 4 boys, and they had a very bad, ugly divorce. He lost all 3 homes. Lost virtually all of his income. The lawyers came out making like a bandit.
Yeah, they
imagine that.
It's just a decimating thing financially.
You know, we look at time and again as to what it's going to take for us to have a leadership responsibility in our own families. Jeff and I are both fathers. Jeff has 3 children. Jeff has 5. I have 3. I was going to give up a couple of your kids. And so we're trying to figure out, you know, as men, as we are leaders of our family, as we consistently grow and our kids are becoming teenagers and then soon to be adults and they go through their process of life. Tell me what you would say is a leadership example for a father. That's my only perspective, ladies, sorry, for her father in his family.
Well, I think that one of the great leadership activities that a father has to do is show devotion to his wife. I think children learn from the example of the father. When the father, for example, doesn't take any guff from the children who show disrespect to the wife. My kids have all learned that if they disrespect their mother, there's definitely a reaction on my part that's pretty strong.
Sure.
So they know better, and they've learned from that. Likewise, I think fathers need to spend time with their children, as hard as that can be, given that we're the breadwinners typically. Fathers need to teach their children, spend time with them, teach them about life, about their life lessons, encourage them. I think that the best thing a father can do is just be a very, very good example of what it means to be a man.
Yeah, I think those are all very, very wise things. I think as a father, you're constantly being pulled, and today's working mothers are probably feeling the same thing, where you feel like you almost can't do anything right. You're always, you know, or when I say right, 100%. Now, you try to give attention to the kids, and then the house is dirty, or you try to give attention to the finances, and your spouse feels neglected. And so there's constantly, how do you manage that where you don't end up getting upside down? And folks, I think it's about priorities.
It really is, and I think one of the most important things is for families to actually have a regular, maybe a weekly time to get together. You know, we used to do it on Monday night or on Sunday night. Get together as a family, either talk about things, do an activity together, watch a movie together, play together. But if there's an expectation that at least one evening a week we are going to be doing things as a family and everyone's expected to be a part of that, that goes a long way, I think, to building families. And
one of the big conversations I had to have when my kids were little, and you always have that in this case, my oldest child, he's one you know, and he was probably, 10, 11, 12-ish, you know, something like that. And had the smart aleck response to his mom or something, and she was in the kitchen, I'm in the living room. And you hear that, and you see that, and you go, you know, did you really just say that? And they almost want to get a reaction out of you. And they're doing a test, like, let me show you. And I remember sitting there thinking, am I really going to allow this to happen? Now, when I was a kid, if I would have done that, my dad would have thrown a shoe at me, and I'd have found that shoe in all sorts of places. But I remember bringing him over to me, and I said, apologize to your mom. And he said, no. So I spun him around, and I put him over my knee, and I swatted him on his fanny 3 times, stood him back up. And he said, that didn't hurt. And I said to, you know, so now I'm thinking, oh, what my dad would have done, I'd be flying out the back window right about now.
Yeah, pretty much.
And I looked at him, and so, you know, real quick, you're thinking, and I said, did you think I wanted to hurt you? And he looked and he goes, well, yeah. I said, no, I needed you to know how much you just disappointed me as my son.
That's powerful.
I thought you were better than that. The tears came out. To this day, there is not a more respectful human being to his mother than I've ever seen in my life.
That's great. Great lesson.
And you have to teach kids that, and I had to do this not too long ago where it was kind of a bit of a joking thing, but I had to stand up and say, look, before you were our son or our daughter, she was my wife. And my job is to stand in front of a train or a bullet or whatever it takes. And that was a big deal because kids call that normal. So when they get involved in a relationship later, they see how a dad, and in this case, that's the only thing I can control, ladies, you control yourself. I had to say, what can a dad do? What is my responsibility? What are they supposed to call normal? And that was a big deal. And I think that's the same thing with leadership in business, success, hard work. I didn't want to have my kids come home with me or me to come home with my, I'll tell you a quick story, and we're going to take a break here in just a minute, where I would go and come home from work with my tie all undone, and guys, you know, roll up their sleeves, and they just look like they got the tar kicked out of them as they come walking up the driveway. I don't. I'll undo my tie as I go home, but then I put it all back together as the moment I left, because why would I want my kids to go, great, look at how he left in the morning. He's going to come back looking like that. So at the end of the day, that's what it looks like. Forget it. I'm not going to work hard. Right?
Stephen R. Covey once taught me a great lesson. He was my first boss out of college, and he once said to me, when I come home from work and I pull in the driveway of my home, I say to myself, I'm about to start the most important work of my day right now.
That's right. We're going to take a break, folks, as we continue Total Financial Solutions Safer Money Hour. Those of you joining us on Facebook Live, stay tuned. We're going to continue when we come right back on your place for news, talk, and information, AM 1220 KHTS. Hey, welcome back to the show, Total Financial Solutions Safer Money Hour. Your place for news, talk, and information. Okay, you guys joining us Facebook Live, go to TFS Wealth or TotalFinancialSolutions.com or TFSWealth.com or go to Total Financial Solutions on HometownStation.com. A lot of addresses, right? A lot of places to get to. Well, you're going to get a chance to learn a little bit from Ara Norwood. Now, why do I bring up Ara Norwood as an example? Because he is an expert in his field, professor, entrepreneur, time management expert, former employee, worked with and under Stephen R. Covey, Franklin Planner, if you know who Franklin Planner is. He's now the owner of the Franklin Planner. I guess they purchased it. Covey purchased it many years ago. But tell us a little bit about balance. Jeff, you had some questions. In fact, this is a good question.
Well, you talked earlier in the show, Irf, about having multiple lives. Or you have multiple lives, in all of your different things you do in your career and your family life. Irf and I are probably no different, maybe a different scale. But having that balance, we're kind of touching on it, but balance, I think, is a really key part of someone's success, not just financially, but we can. And I'm a victim of this too, or not a victim, I should say, but I'm guilty of it, where I put the priorities out in front, and I think they're the priorities, but other things fall by the wayside. But they're just as important. We all only have 24 hours in a day, but some people are killing it. Some people know exactly how to have that right balance. And they have wonderful family lives, wonderful businesses, and lives all together. And other people feel like they're struggling. One part gets neglected, one gets too much. How do you go through that and give a good amount of attention to both of those areas or multiple areas that are equally important?
Excellent question. My belief is that we are the architects of our life, and thus when we look at our various roles, and I have more than the average bear. I mean, teacher, manager, lifelong learner, writer, consultant, family man, friend, musician, and I even have a role I call disciple, the spiritual dimension of my life. All of those things have to get their fair share. Now, they don't all have to get equal amounts. And I recognize that not everyone's needs are acute and critical at any one given time. But as I look at the week that is upcoming and I look at my roles and I ask myself, what is the most important thing, the single most critical thing I could do in my role as a teacher or my role as a manager or my role as a family man or my role as a friend, what could I do this week? And I get to orchestrate what I'm going to give time to that week, when I'm going to give it. I put it in the calendar. Sometimes it does get derailed by a more important, critical, unexpected event. But for the most part, there is a plan maintaining balance to whatever the appropriate degree is. And I don't actually set a task or a goal each week for every one of my roles. There are times the nature of the upcoming week is such that I have a major work project, and so my work as a manager, my work as a consultant is going to take front and center, and my role as a musician may have to be backburnered for this week. But the following week, maybe that will come up again. Being a musician will be more important, perhaps. So it's a matter of making, again, choices, wise choices that are very cognizant, very conscious, very deliberate. And I do that, again, every Sunday night at 8 p.m. for about 40 minutes. I map out that process and do all I can to stick to it. Now, here's another thing that's implicit in your question. During the course of the week, say something comes up that you were not expecting. It wasn't part of your plan. Let's say a friend calls you and says, hey, I need your time and attention for X, Y, and Z. At that point, I have to exercise integrity in the moment of choice right there. I'm at a fork in the road. If that friend wants to have breakfast on him and shoot the breeze and catch up, but I was supposed to be in the gym that morning at that time, I'm probably going to say, let's take a rain check on that breakfast. Let's schedule that. If on the other hand, if that same friend says, I've got a very serious problem on my hands. It's almost life or death. I need your advice. Would you please meet with me this morning? Well, although I was going to go to the gym, maybe that relationship is so key that it's important I forego the gym that morning or try to fit that in later if I can and give that person my full and undivided attention. So there has to be flexibility, but there also has to be integrity. You have to know when to say no to others. And I've found that I've gotten really good over the years at learning to say no at the things that are less important because I'm saying yes to the things that are more important.
I think flexibility, integrity, and forgiveness. If you make a mistake, if you get derailed, get back on the horse. You're going to make mistakes as you go, and part of the process is to correct. If this is new to you, you're going to make some mistakes. You're going to overdo something or underdo something. So get back involved. Kind of walk through that process. I think that's a key component. And one of the things we want to finish up before this hour is up is the difference between being busy and productive. Please don't think because you shuffled papers around on your desk and you were busy that has anything to do with your bottom line or your financial success. Busy versus productive is almost like night and day. Can you comment on that, Ira?
Absolutely. I think a lot of times we do get caught up in the thick of thin things. That is to say, we have many, many opportunities afforded us every day to be involved in things that matter less, that are perhaps have the appearance of urgency, perhaps there's someone else's agenda, but they really don't bring us satisfaction or things of outcomes of consequence. And so we always have to have that on the forefront of our mind. And the question I always ask myself is this. Every so often I'll stop in the middle of the day and say, is what I am doing right now the most important or the best use of my time? Is this the most important thing I can be doing right now? Or should I shift gears right now and abandon what I'm doing and get onto something that is substantive and consequential? And I find when I remind myself to ask that question, is what I'm doing right now the best use of my time? I find that sometimes I have to stop and call an audible and get off the track I'm on and get onto a better track.
Have some time in your day and throughout your day where you can make some adjustments, where it's free time, freestyle, if you will, to talk to the kids. And I think that is a helpful part, but structure matters. It sounds like successful people, which ultimately leads to financial stability and wealth, maybe even, have a purpose. They have a plan, and they actually have a process.
Absolutely, they do. I've never met a person who's been wildly successful who was without a process and without a plan. Success rarely comes in a happenstance manner. You've got to plan for it. You've got to go for it.
One of the things that a gentleman happened to be sitting next to me on a plane, and we both had a similar watch, and we looked at it, and I was going to a conference in Las Vegas, and he's sitting next to me, and he was a comedian, a fairly successful comedian. We're both on a Southwest flight. And we're sitting there, and we're admiring each other's watches. I collect watches. And we're like, oh, that's great. Oh, that's nice. And he said, isn't it interesting how, I can't remember. He said something like, it took me a while to be able to save up to buy this. And he said, me too. Once I got on the Johnny Carson show, then I was able to buy it. And wow. And he said, isn't it interesting that people think when you're wealthy, you're just a consumer of things? Because when you're poor mindset, that's what you think. Right? Oh, you just won the lotto. Here's $1 million. Oh, I'm going to buy this. I'm going to buy that. I'm going to buy that. They think that's what wealth is about. And wealthy people are not about that. It's completely different. Ara Norwood, folks, thanks for joining us. Hey, listen, I want you to, folks, I want you to go to Uncommon Sense. That is his newsletter. Ara, give me real quick, how do we get a hold of you?
Sure. You can reach my newsletter if you want to subscribe to it. It's free, but you opt in at my website, which is aranorwood.com. That's ARANORWOOD.com. Uncommon Sense, free, comes out twice a month.
Thanks for joining us, folks. Arif Halaby, Jeff Gerard, and special guest Ara Norwood on AM 1220 KHTS.